Where is it?
Okay, I think we have everybody.
I don't see Bob. He'll be
There
on.
he is.
I'm here.
There you go. You just appeared.
Okay, so let's reconvene to open session. And if we could get a flag salute, if everyone would mute your microphones except for Mr. Colvig, we'll do a flag salute.
Sorry.
Okay, ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. And if Mark would give us a brief report out of closed session.
Yeah. We discussed employee who will be retiring officially in June, but leaving us at the end of December for the retirement incentive, and the board unanimously voted to approve the proration of that retirement incentive to the employee.
Thank you. And one of the hot topics that's kind of always been hanging over our heads with respect to the last bond measure was our solar system or solar panel stuff. We've been working with a vendor to try and give us a little bit more information about whether or not that system is working to our advantage or not. And Mark, have you got some more information?
Sure. I met with the vendor, talked with one of their representatives, and essentially the district receives $65,000 on a year average reduction from PG&E on our electrical. Now, because we're a school district, they're truing up with us at the end of the year. In regards to homes, they true up monthly. And when they do that, obviously we generate a lot of juice June, July, and August. And so, that's just, most businesses don't operate like we do. That's why PG&E, because we're a business account, that's the formula they use.
So let me
unfortunately,
let me get clarification. I understood that it's homes that true up annually.
I'm sorry, you're correct.
Okay.
You're correct. I always get that backwards. It's homes who do at the end of the year because their volume is so low compared to what ours is. And so PG&E with big accounts like businesses, they true up every month. And because they true up every month, we have 3 months of the year where we don't use a lot of juice like we normally do. But we're not going to change that system. But what we did find out is that we average about $65,000 a year in savings. We did find out every single one of the solar panels, there's 7 different sets of panels on 4 sites. All 7 sets are working. They're working not at full capacity. They gave us some things to look at. One was the inverters. They checked the inverters and they're working. They do suggest that we save some money because some of them are pretty old and we may need to replace them. But we have to do some things like clean the glass. The Tyco system that's used to kind of monitor what happens, it's kind of our monitoring system to make sure PG&E's giving us what they're supposed to. They're not real happy with how that's working and the data it's producing. So they don't think that data is very good. And they think we ought to consider doing something different with it. I'm going to investigate that a little further, but the good news is they're all working. We are generating some savings from it. And we're going to try and make ourselves more efficient. We're going to clean the glass. We're going to make that part of our normal maintenance schedule. Essentially right now, they got a big load of ash put on them. And so we got to get that off. And so the solar works fine. they're concerned about the oldest one we have is on the top of the gym roof at the high school. That's been there a long time. And their response was, it seems to be amazingly still working well. So whoever put it in did a good job. It's still up and running, but it's still a work in progress. But as I tell folks, solar's not the solution to everything for us. We spend far more on city water than we're going to save on solar. And so we've worked pretty hard trying to reduce our city water consumption, especially with sprinkling. But it's all part of the program. We got to get it as efficient as we can. And I'll have an official report from them that I can share with the board before our next meeting.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Let's go to Tessa with WTA.
Is she there?
She was there a while ago.
Dawn, are you taking Tessa's place?
Well, I wasn't planning on that, but I'm not seeing her on the call. I know she was going to mention that the elementary schools had their trainings the last 2 weeks for benchmark and everyday math. And just to help us understand those online components better, so we can try to incorporate that into our lessons. What else did she want to share? Some of the elementary teachers are still doing that Arts Initiative program, and we're teaching children how to read visual art, and then slowly integrating that into other areas. I wish I knew what else she was going to say. I'm sorry.
If someone can reach out to her, she's welcome to step back in at any time.
Okay, I will text her right now.
I just got a text message from her.
I was trying to say that I have a couple of emails from her. She's asking me if I'm going to let her in.
Oh, okay, good.
She was in.
I thought it was by phone or something. Let me double check look at my email again.
Trina, will you email her back or text her back and say use the first link she went to? Because she popped into the closed session meeting, and that's the right one.
Restart Zoom and jump back in.
Yeah, we can go back to it.
Yep. How about Mr. Green with CSEA?
Good evening, everyone. Things are going okay. The classified staff has been pretty busy doing cleanings and projects. Everybody's kind of staying busy. We're not immune from issues with what's going on, but all of our issues that we've had, we've been dealing with direct administration, Mark and HR, and we seem to have been working through stuff. And let's just hope we can keep plugging along and keep it going good.
I do want to say with CSEA, they've been super helpful with going to different positions, and we have kitchen ladies who are doing some bus duty, working in classrooms, and we have lots of people doing different roles, and it really is beneficial because this is a topsy-turvy time, and they don't always work out perfectly and smoothly, but they've been doing a good job of making things work. Our kitchen staff in particular is probably spread out between multiple departments right now and being very helpful.
Cool. Thank you. Go ahead, Mark, with your superintendent comments. Well, let's see. Pardon me. We've got board comments next. Let's go ahead and start with Paula.
Okay. Well, mostly I just have a couple of questions and a comment in particular. I know that I made this comment back in February, but I'm going to make it again just because it hasn't seemed to completely quit itself. We are a small town. We are full of differing opinions, and some of us get especially worked up, it seems, or especially adamant about their points of view. And that's, you know, the best I can figure, that's normal behavior for everyone who does it. However, we're back to having the little vote yes and vote no signs and this candidate or that candidate for school board. Those signs are all over. You got neighbors who have differing signs. I even noticed city signs that are pushing for Measure K, and for particular people to be on their board. They're being lifted up and tossed or replaced by other signs. There are just two things besides, well, the stuff I said last time that we need to remember. A big one is that you need permission from the people where you place your sign to place your sign there. You can't just walk up and put it somewhere because somebody else's sign is there. You certainly can't replace the sign. And if I'm not mistaken, I remember from Alex back in February that this is a federal offense. The police were contacted about 2 such events that I know of. And the best they could say was, you know, well, with no cameras, we don't know who's doing it. And I agree with that 100%. It's just that people might need to be reminded that in the first place, each person gets to think what they think. And if they plan to put out a sign that tells everybody else what they think also, they really need to show a little respect for that. I'm bringing that up again. Then I have another thing, and it's about students coming to school. I've been getting an awful lot of questioning that has to do with which kids are coming to school and which aren't. And I did a little of my own asking around. Seems like some classes, in particular special ed, has permission to have kids up to a certain amount come back and forth to their class. But I think that maybe if later, maybe during your report, Mark, or something, that if we could just kind of clarify what are the rules or what allows some kids to come to school and some kids not, it might just be easier kind of once and for all. I truthfully don't know the whole story. And I know what we all agreed to, but that, you know, there are always exceptions to the rule. And so I did say I would bring that to the forefront. So there it was in the forefront. And that's about all I have to say at this minute.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Paula.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to Jeannie.
Hi, everybody. I'm helping my grandkids every Thursday. I'm the adult in charge of my grandkids on Thursday. One is in first grade at Brookside, and the other one just started 6th grade at Bethel Grove. And they work together in my kitchen, one in one corner and the other one at a small desk. And it's given me wonderful insight into not only how students of different ages seem to be responding. I mean, this is only two examples, so I don't know how all kids are responding, but it gives me insight. My granddaughter who's is in first grade, she's using an old iPad of mine, and we bought her a stand so it's sitting up rather than lying down. And when she comes on Thursday, she comes with a folder from the teacher and the box of her whiteboard and her box of dry erase pens and all that. And so it's been really interesting to me to see how she interacts, how she responds, how the teachers divided up the classroom, how instruction seems to be going. My granddaughter basically started the school year as a non-reader. She's a real young first grader. She just turned 6 in August. And anyway, she seems to be learning and she's interacting, and I've gotten to watch a couple of videos that I'm not sure if, I can only speak to this one teacher, but I know that they're using, the first grade teachers have done unlocking the code videos. I just watched one for Studer C's the other day, and it's been really informative to me. And then my grandson, who's started in 6th grade, I don't I see him working. He's on task. He's interacting. It seems to be pretty seamless for him. And he's being a really good self-starter. He's keeping notebooks on different classes. And I heard there's some problem with freezing and with the teacher's voice sounding robotic sometimes and that kind of thing. So there's some tech issues. And also because I have my granddaughter on Thursday, I get to see Kids Club some, and she doesn't always want to do it, but I have gotten to see her participate in Kids Club on Zoom, and it's the same thing as with the class. She seems to be connected and interacting with people, and it comes across as human beings, not some distant kind of human being. And anyway, it's been informative also. And I attended the Bechtel Grove Middle School virtual back to school night. I didn't attend the whole thing, but I attended the introduction that Mackenzie and Maria did. And I really wanted to see how they were managing this virtually and what kind of participation they got and how they were communicating to parents. And Maria and Mackenzie did a really good job in the introduction, communicating to parents, and then I popped into 2 different classes. I didn't want to sit through them all, but I popped into 2 different classes and to see how the teacher was communicating to the parents and what kind of participation they had, and that was also really informative. And I hope I didn't overstep my bounds on this one, but I got curious as to how things were going this far into the school year. So I sent an email to each site administrator the other day. I was thinking of going in person and talking to them, but then I thought, well, I have to mask up. They have to mask up. I don't know what their schedule is like with distant learning, how things. So I thought I'll just send them an email to be less burdensome than coming in person. So I asked them all site administrators. I sent one to Brookside, to Blosser, to Bechtel Grove, to the high school, and to Sanhedrin. And I said, I would like to know what is the enrollment in comparison to what it had been with regular school attendance. How is the attendance panning out with remote learning and students' participation in their online classes? How is the staff managing with remote learning? What is working and what isn't working? What is, and whatever school site it was, doing to maintain communication with parents? How are we determining student progress at this point in the school year with remote learning and play? And anything else you would like to communicate with me would be appreciated. So I heard back from Jeff at Sanhedrin and Mike at the high school. And I just heard back from Maria at, and Mackenzie at Bechtel, but I haven't had a chance to read it. And I know that that Kathleen said that she would get back to me by Friday, and I haven't heard back from Nancy yet, but it's been very informative, the responses that I've gotten. So it gives me a much clearer picture as to how things are going. So I hope I haven't overstepped my bounds as a board member, but I was feeling sort of disconnected, and I myself don't like to mask up, and so I'd rather stay home. So anyway, it was the responses I've gotten have been really helpful. And that's it.
Jeannie, as those responses come in, would you be kind enough to forward them to us? Maria was kind enough to forward her response that she sent to you to the rest of the board.
Yeah, I'd be glad to send them along to you.
And I got part ways through Maria's this afternoon before the board meeting, but I wasn't able to finish it. So we'll move on to Mr. Chavez.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Again, I want to thank all those teachers that are out there making it happen with this distance learning. I appreciate that so much. It means so much to the families and the children. On the other hand, one of the things that I'm seeing out in the community is I'm seeing a number of families that are struggling with the long distance learning. In fact, I was just having a conversation prior to coming in with one of our business people here in town, and he came to his own conclusion that are high-risk students, those students that are struggling academically, that this is only compounding their struggle, which of course, as the research is coming out, it does substantiate that. There's a number of students that they have no problems, they did well in school before, and they're doing well now, even in distance learning. However, there's a number of other students who may not have access to the quality support at home, where they are struggling and it's going to compound their problem. And many parents want the schools to open again. Of course, that's not all parents. And I say all this is I'm hoping us as a district, as soon as we're given the green light, that we aggressively pursue opening our schools so that those children do not fall further behind. But I do appreciate all the work that's being done and all the thought that is put into this long distance learning that's going on now. But thank you. And one other thing, Mark, in your presentation, can you give us a quick overview of all the activity that's happening at the high school with CAL FIRE? That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll wait for Mark to give us that during his comments. Okay. Mr. Kovic, you're up.
Well, I'd like to thank the teachers and the administrators and staff for helping everyone through this awkward situation of distance learning. And like Robert said, it's easy for some students to fall through the cracks. So we need to find those students, and help them stick with us till we get back to regular school. So everyone's work is much appreciated. I thank you.
Thank you. I would echo those comments as well. Very much appreciate all the things that are going on behind the scenes to try and reach out to all those students. I agree with you 100%, Mr. Chavez. The data is definitely showing that those that would succeed despite our efforts are going to still succeed. There's a certain segment of our population that they're going to fall further and further behind with every passing day that we continue with this distance education model. Yes, we need to get back in the classroom as soon as we reasonably can. And I strongly support getting back into the classroom just as soon as we can do so in a reasonably safe fashion. It's campaign mode for 4 of us that are looking for 2 seats on the board. As you know, my seat and Mr. Kovic's seat are both up for re-election, and there are 4 of us that are vying for those 2 seats. I want to say thank you to the CSEA, thank you to the WTA for the candidates nights that were put on here recently by both unions. It was informative. It gave us an opportunity to let everybody know kind of like where we stand with respect to a wide range of issues. We'll see how well that pans out come November 3rd, or realistically November 4th. So, but again, my thanks to all of you that participated. It's clear that there are a lot of people in our community that take this seriously, and quite thankfully, they should. And whether or not I'm still on the board at the end of this process, I think I would personally like to see 10 or 15 people with their hats in the ring that are trying to run for our board positions. The fact that we have 4 is good, but again, I'm looking for more involvement, more people that have a strong opinion about how they want to see our school district move forward. So I'm one of those people that would be very, very pleased to have quality people on our board that are willing to stick their neck out a little bit in favor of making things better for our kids and our community. That's really all I got to say there. And on to Mr. Westerberg. You're muted, Mark.
It's probably going to be November 25th before we know the results of the election, by the way. But Dawn, you have Tessa's notes, correct? Somehow I cut Tessa off, totally unintentionally, by the way.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go now?
Sure.
Yes, please.
All right. Sorry about this, you guys. She tried to get on, and somehow she got kicked out, and Zoom is one of those hard platforms for some people. So, all right, we have a new Stay Well representative for WTA. It's Melissa Coughlin, and she starts next week, I believe is the first meeting. We are losing our grievance chair, David and Lilliker, and so we'll be looking for a new grievance chair to represent us. We are going to be having elections soon for our site reps, so if the principals have been wondering who to talk to or why nobody's been bugging them, we're in the process of those elections still. Tessa and I had a meeting with the local CTA leaders, and Leslie Littman, who's the Secretary Treasurer for CTA, was at the meeting, and it was asked about the attendance engagement forms that we've been asked to fill out at the elementary levels. And they have spoken with Tony Thurman personally. And those are just suggested forms. And a lot of us teachers are having a really difficult time because we've created our own attendance forms. And so we certainly want to talk with the district more about this, about maybe we can use our own, because like I know I'm tracking if they come for every session, and that form doesn't quite fill that out, and that's a whole extra bit of time to fill out that form. So so that's something that we certainly want to work together on, and because it has been an extra frustration for us. Tess has been super busy with Prop 15 and busy with mailing postcards and phone banking. And if you like more info, please contact her. And if you've noticed, a lot of those propaganda ads have disappeared that were against Prop 15 because they were saying illegal things that weren't true about the prop. So we sure want you to go for it. I mean, yeah, it's only $1 million, but it's $1 million we don't have now, and it would benefit us greatly. In the school calendar, we have noticed that next year's calendar and the year after that there is a typo to be worked out that has to do with the teacher workday that we need to work with you on to fix. And teachers have received that distance learning playbook, and MCOE is offering evening trainings to learn how to use that book and implement it. There's one more thing here that had to do with Sherwood, and it was just coming in as I was starting. They've been doing a lot of creative, beautiful works of art up there at Sherwood, and they're holding their traditional pumpkin carving contest that they look forward to. They're going to be working with their parent board on some more activities. Brookside is holding their annual spooky story night soon, virtually. So I hope a lot of people, I hope that link will get out there so everybody can join that. And that's always a fun event, even if it has to be virtual. Okay, she says, I've been in contact with EJ Renner from MCOE. He and I have been reaching out to staff district-wide to get input on different tech and services that they are interested in based on what he's offering, and hoping that a lot of the teachers will be participating in those end services is coming up in the next several weeks. Up at Sherwood, our custodial staff, this is from Lisa Bowles, that the custodial staff, Dustin, has been working extra hard with his usual cleaning duties during COVID, but also has been busy working very hard on refinishing all of our old picnic tables. And she just wanted to recognize and thank him for those efforts, making them beautiful again. He's doing a really great job. I think that's it. So thank you.
Well, a couple things, Dawn. I met with Senator McGuire and some other people, and I usually kind of get right to the point. And I told him about this fantasy baseball stats attendance on every kid is absolutely ridiculous and pointless. He's killing the teachers. The teachers are going to revolt over this stuff. It doesn't make any sense because it doesn't impact our ADA at all. The real wild card is what is our auditor going to look for when they come? So Nikki gave me the auditor's email. I called and then left an email, and he sent me back a note saying, I really don't know what we're looking for yet because they haven't told us. But my message to Jennifer was, make attendance as easy as humanly possible. We're more worried about engagement and keeping kids engaged and keeping them performing than we are if it's synchronous, asynchronous, and all those other check-off boxes they want you guys to do. We will try and make it as simple as we're possible to get away with. Paula, when you asked the question about who can be on campus, we did a K-5 waiver that allows a teacher to bring a student on if they need to in K-5. But we predominantly did that waiver for special education because there's some kids who have no possibility of jumping on and doing a Zoom lesson, and they need some direct instruction. We have kids who have PT and OT and all that kind of stuff, which you have to be on site to do. And so most of that has been special education. There have been some opportunities where teachers have had a kid who struggles or they've had some issue and they've had the student come in, but that's not the norm. We did have the parents and the students in K2 come the first week and meet with the teacher. So the K2 teachers did a real, I think it was a K2 or K5, John? I think it was K5.
It was K5, yeah.
Yeah. The parent and the student came in and they set up meetings almost like a parent-teacher conference. So at Bechtel, for example, there's a group of kids who come in every day into like the library area because they have no internet access. And so they're accommodating kids in that manner. But in regards to general instruction on a regular basis, it's pretty much limited to special ed every day. And they don't come in every day, by the way. They have a rotation. It's either 2 to 3 days a week.
Okay.
The other thing that we want to talk about is to make sure that, you know, when we talk about coming back, remember that it's the county health department who's going to set the guidelines. And I'm kind of the same mind Alex is. I don't want to be the first to jump back in, but I also want to be out there talking about activities for kids. I sent all you guys that stuff a week ago about guidelines for how to do activities with students. That I'm really in favor of because they're predominantly outside, follow the rules, that kind of stuff. We're really losing a lot of high school kids who are getting detached. And we really need to get focused on that. But my best guess when everybody asks me, when do you think we're going to come back in? I always tell them, what's going to happen, we're going to get close to Thanksgiving. Everybody's going to say, well, let's let everybody meet over Thanksgiving and see what happens in 2 weeks. Well, that 2 weeks is going to be close to Christmas. Then they'll use the same analogy again. I'm telling folks mid to late January is what I think is the window of opportunity. However, that's also the window of opportunity for a cold and flu season. You know, imagine a school year where you can't have a kid even get a cold, or they're going to be like, oh my God, what's wrong with them? They must have COVID. So it's going to be a struggle, folks, to get back in session. It's going to be a real struggle. In regards to what Robert asked me about the National Forest Services here, they were here initially with about 100 plus people. Unfortunately, the fire spiked out at Pillsbury, and the southern fire is in pretty good shape, but it spiked at Pillsbury, and the northern fire is still a problem. And so we went from 100 to 200. And so they are using lots of rooms at the high school. They're using all the fields to camp. it really is a logistical, it's like moving in an occupying army. I mean, they have everything of their own and they take care of business and line it all out. And so the teachers at the high school have been great about accommodating their space and their needs. Mike's moved everybody around as best he can to accommodate that. And, you know, no safer way to keep your town than to have 200 firemen sitting in it. It's also pretty good for the local economy. They're up and down the street all day long. So they're great to work with. They're super organized and prepared. So it's the National Forest Service. It's not CAL FIRE. They're, as Alex will tell you, they're completely different. This is like Army and Navy. They work together, but they also are very independent with each other. And so, yeah, that's been a good thing.
One quick question, Mark.
Sure.
Are we being compensated for giving up all our rooms and our area?
We are. We're getting some compensation. It's not a deal breaker. And it's going to be based on the number of days they're here and the number of rooms they take over. But it's not some, you know, we're not putting a new roof on Blosser with a rent payment from them. It's basically thank you money. And for us, you know, one of the things that we need to really work on is fixing, you know, some things. And I'm looking at some of those funds to help get some equipment we need to fix stuff. But other than that, it's no big windfall.
The one really nice thing about these incident management teams, they are, for the want of a better way to put it, they're not concerned with the amount of money they spend, but they do want to maintain good relations with wherever they bring their operations. They will make sure that we are either compensated or they actually repair any damage that they cause. They are really, really good about that sort of thing. I worked with one of these teams for 2 years back when I was playing the fireman, and very, very highly professional operations. These people the individuals that make up this incident management team come from all over the country. For the incident commander that I worked for was from Hawaii. So when he got activated, he'd hop the next flight to the States, to the mainland, and we'd go to work. But yeah, very interesting operation. It's a small city unto itself. It's really quite an interesting operation, and I'd encourage you to go down there, stop in, say hi, and check it out.
One of the things, Dawn, you asked me about the calendar. If there's a calendar issue, I see Sandy's on. Generally, Sandy's my calendar person. So if you get that to her, she'll usually email me and we talk about it and work through it. It sounds like it's not a big issue, but I'd be glad to do that. Usually Sandy's my go-to.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I do want to talk a little bit in my part. I'm going to pass the baton to Nikki a little bit, because it's really not on the agenda, but it's something that everybody really needs to get focused on. We've been talking about our having cash on hand, and we're going to have some issues. I want Nikki to talk about our projections a little bit. We'll talk more about it in November, and we'll have to talk a lot about it in December. So Nikki, will you kind of give us an update on cash flow?
Sure. So we have anticipated now that we will reach points during the 2020-21 fiscal year where we will be in cash deficit. So what that means is that we're going to need to secure cash in order to be able to maintain our utility and salary expenditures throughout the end of the year. So where we see that coming into play really is in the spring. And this is primarily a result of the deferrals of the state payments on the LCFF revenue. We've talked quite a bit about that. It was the big difference between what we projected at budget adoption versus what was ultimately adopted by the state in the state budget, which was that they used these cash deferrals as a way of balancing their budgets. And we anticipate that they will be probably between March and June deferring about $4 million our payments into the following school year, and that we would not receive the full payment of those probably until November next year. And so that leaves us in a position of going, I believe it will be either February or March, where we'll see our cash begin to go into deficit. And so we have done an initial application in with the state. There is a tax revenue anticipation note pooled application. So what this means is that districts can go into this process pooled with other districts throughout the state. It puts us in the position of not having to retain our own legal and financial experts to go through this process, and we're able to aggregate that with other districts. So in other words, we will be probably paying some fees, but likely less than if we were to do this process individually, and certainly less than if we were to go out and try to secure a private loan of some type. So at this point, what we have done is just the initial application of interest to let them know that we think that we may be participating. We would then expect that by the December meeting, November or December, the board would need to take official action, and then we would move forward. The expectation is that this process would result in us receiving cash, hopefully at the end of February, which would work out well with our projections, because we are anticipating March to really be where we need that. There is a small possibility we could go into a cash deficit in February, but even if we did, I believe it would be small, and that we could potentially tap into a resource at the county level without having to go to something like this. That would just bridge the gap until we would receive the TRAN funds at the end of February and begin using them to cover our salary for March through June. The repayment on the TRAN is a 13-month window, so that would put us having to pay those funds back by March of the following year. Ultimately, the point at which we expect to have the largest deficit, I think would be somewhere maybe around $1.7 million is what we're looking at. And so we'll be working with the folks who administer the program to do very detailed cash flows to ultimately nail down the correct amount that they would approve for us.
So one of the things you want to remember, it really isn't about our budget. Our budget has a decent fund balance, I'd say adequate fund balance. And we have a budget of 200,000, hopefully plus by the end of the year. The problem is the deferments from the state.
Absolutely. In fact, the balance that we do have is helping to mitigate the amount of cash that we have to apply for in this program. It is offsetting it to some degree, because ultimately it's $4 million in deferments, but we're not going to need to obtain $4 million in cash because we do have some fund balance.
So the big thing to keep track of is when we're asking Nikki questions about, was the deferment as big as the state had projected? That's really the wild card for us. We're going as if what they projected is going to happen. The initial state revenue was slightly higher. It's still lower than ever, but it was slightly higher than what they had budgeted on. Hopefully that will continue, and they'll minimize the deferment. But we don't know that yet. But that's what we're going to have to keep track on. That is the budget woes from March on for us.
Right.
It's not about being solvent. It's about having cash on hand to pay.
Correct. And ultimately, we will, continue to hope that the state has been conservative and that they would ultimately not need to defer as much as they had originally projected. Unfortunately, this process does require, a fair bit of lead time. So we're having to proceed with that conservative projection to ensure that we don't get stuck, in the spring if this does end up being as large as what they expect. So the other aspect of this, which I think is a longer term thing, and there's no action yet, but this is really the first round of available funds. The intention that we have is to secure enough to get us through June. And then we will also be assessing as we move through the next months to see what a longer cash flow projection looks like, because as I said, the deferrals are not going to be fully repaid until November. So we're going to really have to look at, a longer view of our cash flow. Once we kind of jump into this cycle of needing to borrow in order to pay utilities and pay salaries and such, until the state really catches up with their deferral payments and gets back on track, there's a possibility we could be dealing with this, into the next fiscal year as well, and needing to do another tran for that year. So no action on that yet. Just be prepared that this is a long-term process that we'll be in.
And everybody has this problem, by the way, not just us.
Absolutely. This is a statewide issue, and that's the reason that the controller's office started working with the CSFA in order to do this pooled program, because a lot of districts are going to have to tap into this.
So my next question is, well, actually two. Dry period funding is something that we've had to deal with in the past. With the last downturn in the economy, we dealt with that. And if my memory serves me correctly, we dealt with that by basically borrowing money from the county. I'm assuming that with the process you guys are preparing us for right now is that the county's not in a position to be able to provide dry period funding in that high of amount for that period of time.
Right. So I have been in communication with our County Office of Education, and they do have a small reserve there that, and I say small in comparison to our total. I believe I was told it was maybe around 2 million, but I'm not sure exactly. But that's for county-wide use, right? And that needs to be available for all districts in case of emergency. And so if we're looking at having a month where we need $1.7 million, that would be in excess of what they could support with that fund, while still being able to have something available for other districts. But again, if we do see any need prior to these funds coming, for instance, if February becomes an issue, I believe we'd be able to access it to get through until the TRAN funds come for March.
Okay. Next one would be more of a projection, if you will. My concern isn't necessarily where we are today, because I think that because we've been fiscally responsible for some time now and been very careful with respect to trying to anticipate what COVID was going to do to our economy, and we've been careful with our budget to try and anticipate these moves and put us in a position where we can weather the storm. In other words, make adjustments early on with our budget as best we can. Those are obviously paying dividends now, because if we hadn't done that, that we'd be in a much different financial position. But my concern is next March, when the state starts looking at producing the following year's budget, what are your anticipation there? I mean, it doesn't look like the state's budget is getting any better anytime soon. And if their deficits are significant this next year, I can see them basically paying us the $4 million by November, but telling us they're going to defer yet another maybe $6 million, and even include possibly a budget cut to education.
Right. So you have to keep in mind that when they are doing their deferrals, for us, ultimately what ends up happening is they almost split where we are recognizing revenue versus where they're recognizing the revenue flowing to us. So in other words, when they do that deferral, that is helping them balance their current year budget, which means that when we get that money, that's coming out of their next year's budget. And so although we recognize it as revenue for this year, at the state level, it is not. And so until they reach a year where they can literally pay back and fully catch that up, they are in a position where those deferrals push out each year until they buy it down, essentially. So not only do they have to not be in a worse position with their state budget, they need to be in a better enough position to actually catch that up before we won't be in a deferral environment. So if no other factors change, I would anticipate that in fact we will have the exact same type of deferral scenario going between 2021 and 21-22. And in fact, if their state budget declines further, then they're going to be looking at other issues for how they can balance their budget. That may be additional deferrals, although they have sort of jumped straight to a pretty large deferral scenario. So it's hard to imagine how much more they could hang their hat on in regards to deferrals. It may also look like actual budget reductions. You know, it's hard to know. We won't know until January what the governor will propose for next year. But yes, I think that we're going to be dealing with the consequences of this for a couple of years at least.
So one final question with regard to that. You mentioned that the TRAN might involve some fees to the district. Is will the state be on the hook for those fees as well in the future, or is this something we just have to bite the bullet?
My understanding is that the state will not pay for that. And I do not yet know at all what those fees will look like. They have not published the rate information. You know, the groups that are managing this pool that we're going to be applying through have been sort of sprinting through trying to put this all together. And we just submitted our initial interest application on October 9th. And so I expect that they should be releasing rate information over the next month or two, and we'll know in time for you guys to make a final decision or a formal board action on that. But no, I don't anticipate the board, or I don't anticipate the state taking responsibility for those fees.
Thank you.
Alex, one of the things you need to also know is that, you know, if our problem's 4 million, Ukiah's is 16. But the difference at Ukiah and Fort Bragg and Mendocino is they have large bond projects out. And they may be able to use their bond proceeds to weather the storm, where if ours would pass, we maybe have that scenario. But since it's not passed yet, we don't know that. But Ukiah had a $75 million bond for a repair pass. So they may be able to use that to weather the storm better than we can.
Makes sense. Okay, anything further?
No, I just didn't want to get too deep into the business aspect, but I wanted to make sure we talked about it.
Cool. So if we're done with superintendent comments, let's move on to the action discussion. Do we have any public comments on the consent agenda?
Yeah, I do, if it's all right.
Certainly. This is Mr. Green.
Yeah, I kind of spaced talking about the board Zoom meeting we had. Is it appropriate to talk about that now?
I think that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. We recently had a Zoom meeting for the board candidates for the CSEA, and we sent out some questions to answer. Answers were given back, and these questions were a little more detailed questions. And we had different questions for the meeting itself because we kind of wanted to have spontaneous responses to some of the questions. And I will have to say that it sparked some very good conversations about immediate concerns to the district. And I just want to thank everybody that participated in it, that the comments were very good and positive, and everybody, you know, respected everybody's opinion, and it worked out really good. And if anybody would like to see the link, you can email me, because we recorded it and put it on YouTube. And it worked out very well. And I just
Thank you, Dan. Any other public comments? We're actually going to look for public comments on the consent agenda. Hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve.
Hold up, Alex. I think you got Paula trying to chime in.
Yeah, I found my mute deal, okay. I just wanted to ask about number 7, the approval of the MOU. Before we, I mean, I either like to see it pulled off or a couple of questions answered before you put us up to vote on it.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and ask your questions, Paula?
Okay, well, my question was mostly about, I have it written and I lost it. Well, okay, is this like the standard MOU we do every year, or does this include a variety of activities, additional ones? Because when I read it over, it sounded pretty, you know, normal, like it always sounds, but I didn't know if they're being set up to do any additional activities or coming together. I mean, I don't know how that's working out.
It is the same one as we normally use, with only a couple minor additions. And those are basically get out of the box things that we're not as focused with after school as we are working with the school this year. So Kids Club is doing things even during what is the traditional school day, even though we don't have kids in the building. And so the intent is the ACES grant needs to work with the school program, however that looks. And this year it looks very different. And so the grant looks very similar to every other year with a couple minor exceptions. And those are really, we had a meeting with the people, talked about it, you know, how do you write in what you don't know? And so we just made sure we had some flexibility that they could do things during the 8 to 3 window. And those things might be different than what they've normally done. But Kids Club's really flexible to help us do whatever we need to do.
Okay, well, so it talked about hiring people and stuff like that. This is not saying, yeah, they're going to do all this or provide snacks and do all this, because there's no one there, right?
They have people there occasionally, but no, they're not going to provide snacks and that stuff because they don't have the volume of people. You have to remember, this is written as, are we going to be back in session? Are we not? And so it was written with a couple generic statements to say they're going to accommodate helping the school in whatever the way they can while we're distance learning. But if we go back into regular session, they're going to go back into regular mode.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was thinking, but what I'm not understanding then is it says, you know, they're going to discuss purchases of over $2,000, and they're going to do all sorts. I mean, you know, the list is like 23 and 26 things long.
Yeah.
Those are mostly just there for when we all get to go back to school and they exist, right?
That's
and
correct.
So for right now, what are they doing?
Well, right now, they are working with our schools. They happen to have multiple Spanish speakers. Kids Club has a uniqueness that 80% of their employees are also our employees.
Exactly.
And, yeah. And
so aren't they busy?
Well, so what we're doing is we're giving none of them are full-time with us, but it allows them to work a longer day because they can be with us till 3 o'clock. So they're using a combination of Kids Club hours and our hours, but we're not on the hook. For example, if somebody goes from 4.5 to 6.5 hours a day helping, they're not going to be on the hook for insurance because they're on Kids Club time.
Kids Club too. Oh, okay.
So we're focusing the majority of Kids Club between 8 and 3, which is unusual. Usually it's 3 o'clock on.
Yeah.
So, Paula, this is Jeannie. I just have the experience of working with my granddaughter because she is the kids club for the younger kids starts up at 3:30. So she connects in with them with their Zoom ID number, whatever it is, at 3:30, and they do a group activity with all the kids that are that connect in on that particular day. And it's some physical activities, and then they do breakout sessions, and each day there's 2 breakout sessions, and the kids get to choose what breakout session they want to do. So I know the other day my granddaughter was doing one on electricity, and another day she did one on with drawing, and they do different kinds of things. So they do a very good job. The people that are are putting on the breakout sessions, they do a really good job of connecting with the kids. It's warm, it's human, it's they're really working hard on reaching out to kids and connecting with them, and I really appreciate their efforts.
So it's kind of like school then. Everything is Zoom, right?
Yes, everything's Zoom.
Yep.
Oh, okay, and then they get credit for the kids that plug in, so to speak.
Right.
And that's how they maintain how this works out?
Yeah, they don't want to lose their grant source because
Right.
of COVID. And so they're trying to plug in any way they can to work with the school.
Oh, okay.
It makes a difference. You can tell that the kids, because I'm not only watching my granddaughter's experience, but I'm watching the other kids who zoomed in on that particular day.
Yeah.
And they're involved, they're connected, there's a warm human relationship happening there, and with the kids. So it's a good thing.
Are they available for Zoom tutoring and stuff like they do when they're a regular program?
I don't know.
I mean, they're acting almost the same, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
They're trying to.
They're trying to,
Okay.
yes. They're trying
okay.
to, but I don't know about tutoring.
Okay, well, that's close. Oh, I appreciate that, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm good. Thank you, Alex.
No problem. Anything further on the consent agenda? I'd like a motion to approve
I move to approve.
and a second.
I second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 And the vote carries. Thank you. And item number C, Charlie, approval of the bilingual family liaison job description. We'll go ahead and cover that, Mark.
Yeah. So you've had in your packet, we put together a job description on what a family liaison would look like and the jobs they would do. I'm sure we're going to tweak this as we go, and some of it will be dependent on who we hire and how that works out. But one of the things that we really need to get better at in our district is connecting with our EL students and having these liaisons who can communicate with parents, be the go-to for parents with second language kids is really important. It is one of the critical things to help engage these kids, because most of the time, unless they happen to be with Nancy or Maria, they're the translator for mom and dad, and it doesn't always work out very smoothly, let's just say. And we need to have people who can connect with the kids, teach them the technology, teach the parents the technology. My child has a problem. It's hard for me to call the school and work it out. Who do I call? And so this is a really needed piece, and CSEA was good at working with us to put these positions in place. And they are, for me, they're the first step in looking at EL and kind of reinventing what we do with EL.
Okay. When do you anticipate hiring?
Tomorrow. No, it will be posted tomorrow. We will be interviewing quickly. We already have some folks who have expressed interest because we've been talking about it. And so we're going to do a posting and look at people sooner than later. We
Okay.
need to, there's no worse time we've ever had for communicating with our EL population than right now.
Okay.
So
Now,
you're
let's
going
make a
in-house
comment.
first and then in the public?
We'll do both at the same time, generally.
Oh, okay.
Mark?
For a week or, I'm sorry, how long are you posting? I mean, in-house used to be 3 days and then 2 weeks out in the public. Is that,
I'm not sure what Laura did. She's going to follow the contract with CSEA. Whatever the contract calls for an internal posting, we're
Okay.
certainly going to honor that. And generally, in cases like this, we do internal and external
at the same time?
I
because
think they're
we
usually
want to
close-
get the best people.
What'd you say, Nikki?
I think typically this, I could be wrong, but I think CSEA usually posted for a week.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it was
so
3 to
too.
5 days.
It's a 10-day posting.
Oh, 10, okay.
Yeah, and then if nobody bites, it can go outside, but we still interview first.
Right.
And this job is, wow, if you read the job description, there's quite a lot in this person's plate. And it'll be good really for this, whoever gets hired to it needs to be really flexible, and admin needs to be really flexible to try to make this gel however it could work out, because it's pretty hard to put a job description together for what this person has to do. I think a lot of it's going to have to evolve as it goes, and then everybody work together on it. But it's gonna be a good position.
Our four
Very good.
principals at Brookside, Blosser, Bechtel, and the high school are all pretty focused on making sure we get the right person and what it's going to look like, because it depends on the building you're at. Again, as you guys know, it's much easier for Spanish-speaking parents at Blosser than anywhere else. I mean, you have Lorenzo and Nancy. It's better at Bechtel than the high school, but we need to make sure all those kids have an opportunity to be engaged, and we need their parents to get on board first.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve item C?
I'll move to approve it.
I'll second.
Been motioned and seconded. Is there any further board discussion? Hearing none, we'll move for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you. We're at item D, public hearing, sufficiency of textbooks. Was supposed to be at 5:30. I think we're a little late. Education Code Section 60119 requires that in order to be eligible for certain state funding for textbooks, the governing board shall adopt on an annual basis a resolution with respect to textbooks and instructional materials availability, and affirm that each pupil in each school in the district has or will have sufficient textbooks or instructional materials, or both, in each subject that are consistent with the contents of and cycles of the curriculum framework adopted by the state board. The board welcomes public input. And does anybody have any discussion with respect to the public hearing?
Alex, just from the standpoint of, you guys got a listing of all the texts that we use. They're all approved by the state. And there only were a few minor tweaks in text. One of them was caught by Jeannie, that our health book was out of compliance. And we do have a new health text at the high school that's referenced in here. So Trina went and did the check with all the buildings to make sure we're on track. And we are. Textbooks are a little goofier now in the COVID online world, but we are in compliance.
So we've gone one-to-one K-12 now, or I should say we're in the process of finishing that basically K-3, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so with respect to that, how much of our textbook requirements are now digital?
Well, every time we buy a text, we try and make sure that we get digitals of it. The ideal scenario for a teacher is to have a classroom set and a digital for all the kids, in the high school in particular. So in the high school, you may have a set of math books in your classroom. 3 different groups might use them, but then they have a digital access to one at home. Most of the vendors are now following that script, where you get hard copies and then you get the digital's availability. My problem with the vendors is they want to charge exactly the same for a digital as they do for a hard copy. But that's something we have to work through with the vendors. But over time, that'll get better. But one of the problems with digital textbooks, Alex, is access to that. We are getting closer with devices to being able to load them on the hard drive, but we're not quite there yet. Our devices aren't quite at that level yet. Textbooks are very huge files on a book. For example, a Chromebook has 32 gigs, for example, of storage on it. All of the stuff from benchmarks, all of the stuff from everyday math is going to take up a lot of that room. But
Okay.
we're getting closer.
So I have a question that maybe Maria could answer. I taught both at the high school and the middle school, so Willits High and Bechtel Grove. And I was looking at the wonderful lists of novels that the high school uses at different grade levels. And I was remembering when I was teaching at the high school, I read a lot of these novels and how much I enjoyed them. And they're wonderful stories, wonderful novels. And we used to have novels, core novels that we read at Bechtel Grove also. Even though my students were special ed, we still read as a group a lot of the core novels. So I was really familiar with a lot of their stories. And I don't see under the Bechtel Grove listing any core novels the way I see it at the high school. So I was wondering if they don't use core novels anymore at Bechtel Grove, if they're just using the collections. Maybe Maria can answer.
They're just using okay, yeah, we do use core novels. We, however, are not using core novels in distance learning because we don't want to pass things out and we don't want to collect them and we don't want to have them go home and then we don't want to have them come back and all that. We are using only collections, and collections has a, I don't know if you're familiar with the curriculum, but it has everything. Every reading that is more focused on the standard that you're teaching, rather than what happens with core novels, and it happens a lot to our new teachers, is that they have to essentially plan their lesson and they have to create the curriculum for the core novel. Mm-hmm. Unless we use something like Engage New York and things like that you know, certain core novels have those materials that we can draw from. So as we have more of a turnover, we really need to use our adopted curriculum so that we're not creating curriculum. That's not a teacher's job. They don't need to be creating the curriculum. They need to create their lessons and their instruction. That's what is their expertise. And so in distance learning, we're not using core novels. We do use core novels, but we use them sparingly now since we have so many teachers that are new teachers at Bechtel.
Thank you, Maria.
So the chat that popped up, Ms. McClellan points out that students have to log into McGraw-Hill in order to be able to access everyday math. Is that a problem?
Yes. McGraw-Hill won't sell you the digital copy. So McGraw-Hill needs to get forced by people to say, we're not going to use your product if you don't put out a digital copy.
So it's our choice to use everyday math.
Correct.
Is there another product out there?
Well, there are lots of them. And that's one of the things you look for is the ability to have a digital textbook. For example, the middle school uses Ready Math, which has a lot of things that are online and digital. But yeah, Everyday Math is one of those vendors who's very reluctant to give up a digital copy of their book because they know it can be reproduced when they do that.
Well, I mean, I guess maybe a better way to frame this is it a problem just to log on to their site? Are we having problems getting onto their site so that their kids can have access to the lessons and so forth that they need to be working on?
As long as they have internet connectivity, they're fine.
Okay.
But, you know, that's a wild card that goes up and down in our district.
It's pretty easy for them to log on to it. I mean, they have a password that is a number, a fruit, and a shape. So it's kid friendly. We learned yesterday how the kids can actually enter answers in on it online. That is not super friendly for them and would be a lot more work for us. I mean, I have my kids using the regular, and then we go over the answers at the end of each math period. So I don't know if there's any benefit to the digital at this point, but I mean, it's good to have it.
Okay. Well, I'm just asking only in terms of, is this a significant barrier to providing instruction to the kids? And if it is, then we need to look at ways to solve that problem. If it's really not a problem, then there's no reason to move forward with anything else. Other than obviously look for a product that's equivalent or better for better money, I guess is probably a better way to put it, that meets our needs or meets the needs of our student population.
Well, we changed 3 years ago to Everyday Math. Unless, you know, it would be nice to have a real normal year with it to know how our performance and academics are going with it. I don't think we're going to be able to glean that out of this year. But,
No.
but I don't think it's not at a problematic stage where we want to change out of Everyday Math at this point.
Okay.
And I think from an expenditure standpoint, typically when we purchase the curriculum, it's for the online access, it's usually done as like a package. Is that right, Mark? So it's like, we'll say we're buying the curriculum up front and part of that package will be perhaps 6 or 8 years of the digital access.
Right.
So
is
we've
it
already
a
paid.
contract? Is it an annual contract that we sign with McGraw-Hill for this, for example?
I don't believe it's an annual contract. It's a contract that we did up front, and we purchased a certain number of hard copies, and then it encompasses, I can't remember how many years, but a block of years for the digital access, and the contract just covers that whole period of time. And then if we have a need, like for instance, if our enrollments change, if we have a need to add on, then we might purchase a couple pieces here and there to make sure we have enough.
So it's more like a subscription.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
It's kind of lease to own.
At least, yeah. Any further comments on the public hearing? We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and move on to E, Edward. Approval of sufficiency or insufficiency of instructional materials. It's a resolution 2020/21-1. I believe those things kind of go hand in glove. Do we have a motion to approve item E?
I move that we approve item E.
And a second?
I'll second.
So it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion on item E? Once again, it's the companion part of item D. Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. It's a resolution. So Ms. Nunez,
Aye.
Ms. King,
Aye, yeah.
Mr. Chavez,
Aye.
Mr. Colvig,
Aye.
and myself, aye. And item F is where we are next. Consideration of board approval to support Proposition 15.
Alex, I want to start out with, I put something on the district website and out on Facebook. And I wanted to make sure our community knows that voting on 15 in favor of 15 doesn't mean that we've taken care of Measure I. They are very different, and Measure I is 100% guarantee that we're going to be able to fix things in our district. We're not going to have to worry about 40% and 89% of the 40%. And if it did come to fruition at 15, it would allow the board to assess less for the taxpayers. You might be able to go from $30 to $15. So you could use that money to offset your millage. So I wanted people to understand that 15 passing isn't going to the panacea that's going to fix us. Even if we got $1 million from it, which is probably not likely, but if we did, that fixes two problems: the roof on Blosser and maybe the parking lot at the high school. So I just want to be clear about that, that 15 isn't, you don't take 15 or I.
And I understand exactly what you're saying, Mark. I'll paraphrase a little bit. Measure I will bring dollars directly to the district, and it's that those dollars are obviously comes in the form of this bond. Proposition 15, if we were to receive $1 million, for example, next year, which is not likely, would theoretically that would enable the board to sell fewer bonds and keep the property, the bond portion of your property tax statement at a lower level.
Yeah.
It would allow us to basically postpone selling bonds to do some of this work in favor of waiting for the economy to get better, so we don't beat up our local population. The other things that I want to make sure everybody recognizes, and this is, again, Mr. Green was very, very good about doing the research on Proposition 15. Proposition 15 is first and foremost going to go towards repairing the state budget. After that, then a certain portion of it will come back to school districts. The only silver lining I see in Proposition 15 at this stage of the game is that, in theory, the state budgets will get healthy sooner, and we'll get out of deferrals sooner with Proposition 15 passing. Failing that, if Proposition 15 passes, the only guarantee that they're offering right now to schools is basically $100 per student per year. $100 per student per year is not going to do anything, and I'm sorry to say that. But until the state budget is repaired, Proposition 15 is really not going to do very much for us.
I view 15 as being complementary to I, and also the fact is that you're right, Alex. The biggest issue there is, if 15 is successful, I think getting the state back to whole quicker will alleviate a lot of deferments that may happen. That may be the best thing that 15 could do for us, is to balance the state back out. But again, there is a potential down the road for revenue that we didn't get before.
And I really think that we need to consider that it is revenue that we haven't had before. Even if it's at its very, very minimum, it's way more than zero. And it doesn't come out of the Willits taxpayers' pocket. It's a statewide event, not just a Willits event. And so to say no thanks to extra money, that's kind of like a gift more than anything else. I mean, certainly, I'm certain there are some people in Willits who, you know, they have a business that's worth well over $3 million. But the majority of the people here, I don't believe, will be facing that. And it is money that is extra. Measure I is great for our school district, if that's what you believe. But Proposition 15 is great for our school district and the school districts throughout the state of California and everywhere else. Even if you don't expect to get any money for Willits, you can definitely expect that it will help the state. And since we live in this state, it'd be handy to help it out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Paula, but the
Good.
businesses in Willits, there are 3 businesses that it will impact dramatically. It's the hospital, it's Spare Time, and it's Metal FX. They'll all hit the $3 million mark.
Mm-hmm.
But again, have they been paying their fair share? That's the question you ask yourself as a taxpayer. And that's why I'm saying that it does impact Willits, but it's also, you're right, the more money the state has on hand, the better they can do for everybody else. So I'm not anti-Prop 15 at all. It supplements what we can do.
Oh, good.
But again, I'm just a single vote. So that's you guys' decision if you want to, as a board, support a proposition.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So-
just think that we are a school board. Hopefully, we would support educational propositions. But you're right, we're each one vote.
Yes, and so if Prop 15 passes, like Mark said, the hospital's going to charge more, Maritime's going to charge more, Mendo Mill's going to charge more for every construction supply you have, Safeway's going to charge more for all the food you buy,
Yeah.
Rite Aid's going to charge more for everything you buy and your prescriptions and everything else. Every business in California, your phone bill's going to go up. So when you aggregate all of these together, the personal bills that you have to pay in your house alone are going to go up exponentially more than whatever Measure I would possibly charge a person for their property taxes. And it's every aspect of your life that you purchase something pretty much, except for maybe the farmer's market, unless that guy's farm is bigger, is pretty much going to cost the individual person more money.
I'm a firm believer that the issue here is we seem to think that there's a bottomless pit of money out there, and we can keep tapping individuals and businesses, and it's another gas tax. It's a higher income tax. It's a higher tax for this or a higher tax for that. It's more sales tax. Every time we turn around, it seems like somebody's trying to add still another tax on things. When in this particular state, we pay some of the highest taxes across the nation, and yet we still are at the 39th percentile. We rank 39 out of 50 states in terms of funding K-12 education. I would argue that the money that goes into our state coffers is, I'm sorry to say it, but I believe a huge amount of it is wasted, just plain wasted. My argument is not that Measure or Proposition 15 is wrong. My argument is that if the state did an appropriate job of managing the funds that they have, we wouldn't be in the position where we're trying to deal with a Proposition 15. Quite frankly, I think that if the state was managing the funds properly, we wouldn't be dealing with Measure I either. Again, I'm like the rest of you. I don't want to pay any more taxes. I get frustrated when I see what the cost of buying diesel for my truck is, for crying out loud. And then I look at the condition of our roads and don't understand where all that money is going, because quite frankly, it just blows me away. Measure I is, once again, it's another stopgap measure for the next thing that's going to come down the road. It's going to cause, at the best, it's going to give us a 5% increase in our budget. At worst, it's going to give us about $150,000 a year at $100 per student. And quite frankly, we're going to be at the worst for quite a while the state's budget is repaired. I just don't see Measure I being a valuable tool for the school district. Is it better than nothing? Yes. Is it really
you
effective?
mean Proposition 15?
pardon me, I'm talking about Proposition 15, excuse me. I see Measure I as being very valuable to our school district. I see Proposition 15 as being just another stopgap measure. So that's what I got.
I spoke up quite a bit last time, so I won't repeat myself, except that I don't think that taxes are raised on businesses without it filtering down to their consumers somehow. And that a company that gets taxed at a higher rate than they were before isn't going to just say, oh, I'll just pay this extra tax. They're gonna pass it on somehow. And I think it says a lot that the State Black Chamber of Commerce, the State Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce, and the State Hispanic Chamber of Commerce all advocated no vote on 15. And I think of the three companies that Mark mentioned, the hospital, Spare Time, and Metal Effects, all give greatly to this community. They have a wonderful community spirit and give a lot back to the community. And paying higher taxes, they may decide they don't have that extra to give back. So anyway.
This may come down to just you making your choice at the ballot box, but in consideration of item E, whether or not it fails for lack of a motion or a second, is there a motion to approve item F, consideration of board approval to support Proposition 15?
Yes, I move that we do.
Paula made a motion. Is there a second? Do we have a second for item F? Without a second, it's going to fail to move forward. And so without a second, we'll move on. We are at item G. First read of, actually we have items G through O are all first reads for a variety of things, largely charter school, parcel taxes, certification, suicide prevention, suspension and expulsion due process, and concurrent enrollment in college classes. They're all first reads. You're welcome to make comments with respect to any of those now, or we can hold those comments until our next board meeting when we have second read on those.
I would like to speak up about item M, the suicide prevention.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
It absolutely crushes my heart that we're at a stage, I'm not talking about Willits Unified, but our culture, our society is at a stage where school districts have to pass suicide prevention for kids K through 6. It just breaks my heart. This society is doing something really wrong. There's something really wrong that kids this young are we have to have a policy in place dealing with suicide prevention for kids this young. Suicide is very personal to me. My mother committed suicide 50 years ago. She first tried to commit suicide when I was 6. I know, and I married a man whose husband committed suicide. So my son has 2 grandparents who committed suicide. It's very personal to me, and it ripples down the family tree. And the pain and the loss don't just don't take place with the people that experienced it firsthand. It ripples down the family tree 50 years later, next generation, whatever. And I sent the board an article that was in Cal Matters. Cal Matters is a statewide media source for information pertaining to California. And it was an article on suicide, and it mainly focused on Humboldt County, using that as an example, and using a Native American woman who lost both a son and a brother to a suicide. But it had some interesting links in it, and it said that a bill to create a statewide office of suicide prevention was signed into law last Friday by Governor Gavin Newsom. This may be a couple weeks old, so maybe it wasn't this past Friday. But there was a problem is at this point there's no money for it. So they created an Office of Suicide Prevention, but there's no money for it. And it said that that monthly calls to suicide prevention crisis hotline run by Sacramento-based WellSpace Health, which serves much of the state, almost doubled this year compared to a year earlier. And it said that one of the main words they hear from callers is hopeless. It says the psychological impact of COVID cannot be underestimated. And I think that that really has to be part of the discussion as far as being open or not open, or masking or not masking, whatever, is the significant numbers of people and families who are really suffering and are really in a bad place economically. I mean, both my parents were alcoholics, and you know, I know what it's like to live in a family with mental illness and or depression, and with the chaos that goes along with that, and with substance abuse. And some of our kids are at home, and they don't. I had school to go to. You know, I had other people in my life, and kids currently that are at home trying to learn from home, they don't have a break from some of the chaos they're dealing with. And anyway, I just wanted to speak from my own personal experience with suicide, is that it's a tragedy and a loss that if you haven't ever experienced it, you do not understand. And I think it's tragic that our culture has come to a point where we're talking about a board policy for suicide prevention for kids that are kindergarten through 6th. How sad. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Jeannie. Very much appreciate those comments. My experience with that is from a different perspective as a firefighter paramedic. The interesting thing is when it affects schools, strangely enough, at least in the Novato community, those suicides came in groups. It was very tragic, and when you're on duty and having to deal with those sorts of things, obviously you have to deal with the victim. But unfortunately, or fortunately, as the case may be, we dealt with the families as well. It is heart-wrenching, to say the very least, and it impacts a very, very wide number of people. And Jeannie is absolutely correct that it lasts a long, long time, those after effects. Anything you can do to help those students, those people, doesn't matter students or otherwise, but when you run across people that in your circle of influence that are expressing those sorts of things, try and get them hooked up with suicide prevention hotlines and people that can help, and try to let people know that this COVID thing will be, eventually it will be better. It's just going to take time, and we have to be as upbeat about it as we can, and recognize that the grass is going to get a little greener at some point. So, and hopefully we don't suffer this sorts of things in our community.
I hope it's okay if I mention this right now, Alex, but I do want to point out, I know materials have gone out to our staff people, but I do just want to highlight that we have implemented an employee assistance program. And so that is new within the last month, and it came about through conversations of the impact of COVID and other circumstances people are dealing with in order to support our employees through the pressures of what everyone's facing right now. So I think all of our employees have received the materials about how they can access that program, but just wanted to let you guys know as well that that is something that has now just started.
Does that EAP also extend to their families?
It does. It extends to those living in their household as well as dependents outside the household who are up to age 26. Perfect.
Thank you. We had that same program in place at Novato, and it actually extends to the retirees as well. So it's a really valuable program, and it's been helpful for a wide number of us for a lot of different things, everything from tax help to mental health services as well. So in counseling and so forth. So thank you.
What's it called?
It's the employee assistance program, and it's through, I believe the company is ESI. And so there have been emails as well as hard copy of flyers and such going out to staff. If you have any questions about it, or if any employees do, please feel free to contact us at the district office and we can get you connected to the phone numbers and the websites.
Thanks. I didn't know about it. I have a couple of questions about some of this. One of them is the board policy revision for parcel taxes. And on the back where it talks about exemptions, I was curious why the word may was put instead of shall. I mean, it seems like it opens itself up to you yes and you no.
I've got to find which one you're looking at.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's letter,
Okay.
okay.
So Paula, I don't mean to interject here, but at the beginning of all of those board policies, there is a board report that explains the changes, and often it will describe that it's the law. So I don't know.
Okay, well, I didn't see that on here, which is why.
Oh, okay.
This is a board policy. It's not a law or ed code or anything. And although it does include ed code things, it just says new policy. So I was curious as to, it says government code 50079, but I was curious as to why it's a may. And some of those can be changed. We've done that on a number of board policies in the past. And I was curious about why that opens itself up like that.
All I can say with regard to that, Paula, is I'll read it more closely, and we can discuss it more in depth at the next board meeting.
Oh, okay. And
Yeah,
then
it
the
is-
only other question that I had was on L, the one right next to it for certification.
Right?
Okay, and what it talks about is that it's another one of those board policies. It's revised, but I don't notice too much that's different, except it just, it doesn't really, there is nothing in it that I could find that says if you choose not to do that, and what is the penalty or the end result. And it talks about the hiring. I'm sorry, yes?
If the person doesn't qualify for a variable term waiver, we won't be able to hire them.
Right.
Okay, it just settles it like that?
Well, it's not a board policy at that point. They don't have a valid state permit to be in a room.
Okay, so what it said that, well, okay, well, maybe we can go over this more next time, because the things that concerned me were the NBPTS standards, which, I don't know, those are kind of tough.
Well, let me do this. Let me have Laura school me a little bit on this, but I do know the thing with the waiver is really pretty simple. If you don't have that documentation, because we've had it where teachers have not gotten promptly done what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
They'd had to get reclassified as a long-term or 30-day sub.
Okay.
Until they get their documentation in place. And in fact, we've had a couple teachers in special ed, because that's where it predominantly hits. We've had to pay a couple of the special ed teachers as a paraprofessional until they got their certification rendered from the state.
Okay, and so none of that is gonna be modified by this?
No. Basically, if you don't have a state permissible license to be in the room, you're not part of WTA.
That's right. But see, on number 2, it says providing bonuses, step increases, or differential pay for teachers who maintain their certification and continue to teach in the district, with priority given to teachers at Title I schools and schools serving a majority of low-income students. Well, our whole district is sort of considered low income, right?
Yeah, that's boilerplate language from school and college that they leave in there. For
Yeah.
us, it's irrelevant. It's 75% of our kids.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, and looking at the policy, most of what got changed looks like it was just changing the order or the formatting almost, how they included the language. It didn't seem too substantial. The only real substantial change I see is near the end where it states that the approved addition and amendments to Title V pertaining to the teacher permits for statutory leave. I'm assuming that the reason that CSBA updated this policy was to include the TPSL, which is a newer type of certification or permit. And so periodically they will go through and update their policies to ensure they're capturing everything that the CTC allows for.
Okay. Okay, it sort of looked like they were changing some of the rules on how to determine who would or wouldn't get a professional teaching standard certification, but it maybe not. I'll look at it, and maybe if I could talk with Laura or you could talk with Laura,
Yeah.
and then kind of let me know. It just looked a little odd.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We can only hire people who have the certificate. If they don't have it, they're not part of WTA.
Right, but they still get to teach because there's a column for them, and they have so
They
many
have a
years.
certificate, but they don't have their credential fully completed. They have a temporary credential, but yeah. But
Okay,
without
I
the
have the-
temporary credential, they're not part of WTA.
Okay, maybe I messed up certificate and credential. Okay.
Okay, so there's plenty of first read details to dig through
Yeah.
over the couple weeks. Item number P was added late. It's the school plan for student achievement template. Can we have a little background?
Maria, I'm going to toss the ball to you. The board is aware of why we have the funding in place and just basically what the plan is about and what we're going to do.
Okay, so the site council, my site council at Bechtel Grove, we looked at all of our data and all of our information for the school last year, and none of the data is been updated because we didn't have any SBAC testing at the end of last year. And so in looking at the data, we wanted to figure out what kinds of interventions or what kinds of actions we could take to make the data better. And we looked at, but in writing this SPSA, I also had to research what the state is calling research-based interventions. And so that's looking at both qualitative and quantitative data that each one of those interventions has. And as I did that, we came up with sort of a trend in the type of interventions that we want to have, that we want to make a part of our SPSA. Mainly, it's to look at our reteaching of concepts and to use an acceleration model that is more effective, or to use, in other words, not just teaching kids everything they don't know right at the beginning, and then they'll be able to run swiftly through the grade level standards and they'll be great. Well, that hasn't worked, and that's a remediation model, and it's never worked. And so what we used instead is an acceleration model, and that is something that was developed through an organization called Ed Collective, which is something like West Ed, a research organization. And so most of our SPSA is built around instructional support for specific populations and instructional support for our teachers. Capacity building for our teachers in terms of this type of acceleration model, where teachers are looking at, are addressing grade level standards And then they are taking those skills to which the progression of the skills that the kids are deficit in, and teaching them right before they begin to before they go into those grade level standard concepts, so that they're relevant to what they're doing at the time. Anyway, that's focused around that. All of the activities and so on, like, teacher or training in our curriculums, further training in our curriculums to address these progression of skills, the teacher coaching, observations in classrooms, all of those activities that are in there are built around this trend that we saw in the research-based interventions. And a couple of things, that's sort of the new piece in the SPSA. Everything else is, some of what we have in there is what we've done before that has worked well for us, but mostly we did that piece for capacity building in our teachers to be able to instruct and do a reteach to concepts in a more effective manner and make sure that we're being effective at it. Did anybody get a chance to look at it?
I did. I have a quick question. I know you and I had tried to make sure we captured everything that we knew was sort of in the works for Bechtel. I don't think I saw the bilingual liaison in there. Do you know if we managed to get that in and I missed it perhaps?
No, that is not included. And I think it was because, Nikki, you were going to get back to me about which things needed to be continued in the CSI.
CSI.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we might need to still roll that piece in. Now.
Yes, so the single plan for student achievement, once it's board approved, is not done and there's no revision to it anymore. It continues to be something that we can continue to look at in our site council and continue to change, especially since this is CSI funding for last year, even though we're just starting to use it this year. And then we have, by the end of this month, I have to apply for our CSI funding for this year. So we can continue to put those in there. That bilingual liaison, some of the instructional aid support in our newcomer class, both of those are things that I didn't hear were things that needed to be continued in our plan, and so I didn't put them in there for now.
Okay.
Maria, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not expecting you to have the answer now. What I'm looking for is just some input from you and making sure I'm reading this right. Now, in your survey, it says that 44% of the girls feel safe at school. Does that mean that 56% of the students, more than half of the students, do not feel safe? That's located on your page 5 of 76. That's how it's labeled.
Yeah, and can you read the sentence in particular?
Sure. When comparing by gender, 44% of girls feel safe at school compared, and I'll go ahead and continue, compared with 14% of boys who are feeling safe. So yeah. Does that mean the greater percentage of students are not feeling safe? And if so, what's your input as a principal as to why those numbers are so?
Okay, so usually because you're doing the comparison just to make the point that girls feel safer than boys by a larger percentage, not necessarily how many students actually don't feel safe. There are different qualifiers to that question. It could be feel somewhat safe, feel not so safe, feel very safe. And so it might be that the other percentage of those students have something like feel safe sometimes or most of the time or some of the time. so it's not necessarily that they don't feel safe, but it's definitely don't feel safer rather than do feel safer. Does that make sense? As
They
far
pick
as
the top and bottom of the Likert scale.
right. So, but that is, I mean, it is a significant number, and we do address that in our SPSA in terms of having our student groups that we meet with our counselor. Our counselor is part of LCFF funding, and so that goes in our site, in our student achievement. But the reason why, not the reason, but what we attribute that to is a lot of uncertainty on the part of students for, you know, in the middle school years, for not having friends, or not having a stable group of friends, or not having, not knowing exactly what to do for their classes, not, you know, those kinds of things. But I do think that part of it is the name calling and the, you know, that kind of thing that happens between students. So we do social emotional learning. We used a curriculum last year. We used Second Step last year for social emotional learning. This year, a best practice is to have teachers embed that in their content area, because they're distance learning. Distance learning best practice for SEL is to embed it in their content area. But that's why we do social emotional learning, so that students are more confident in their ability to navigate the middle school times.
Yeah.
Maria, is that a metric that you guys look at over time? Like, have you guys seen any trends with that? The reason I ask, because I know that that topic had come up before, and you guys had done some work with the Bell schedule specifically to address some of those issues too.
Yeah, that's also a survey that they took in 2018, spring of 2018, which was not last year, but the year before. No, 2017, I think. So it's about 2 solid school years old, right? Because of the, I don't know, because of whatever.
The lag in the assessment cycle. But they continue to take those assessments each year. So as we go forward, we may see improvements there as a result of things that have been changed.
Right, and I understand that. You know, when you first read that, it's just really glaring and disconcerting. And so maybe you want to give more detail on how that was answered, or give more definitive areas. You know, it's sometimes feel unsafe, as opposed when you write it like this, it just looks very negative towards the school. I mean, and I'm a parent. I have a child that'll be going there next year. And if you're looking at that, you know, less than half your girls feel safe at school, as a parent, you're thinking, oh my gosh, do I want to send my child there to not feel safe? Because obviously we all know if a child does not feel safe, you can throw all that learning stuff away, because it's going to be very hard to teach them if they're not feeling safe. And so I don't know if it's the wording, and you know what, it's probably better by now, you know, well 2020 is a mess.
Yeah, well, if you look at, yes, that's good input to how we word it in the SPSA. But also, if you look at our suspension rate, we also had an increase in our suspension rate. So, you know, and that's a whole goal. I don't know if you noticed that there's a goal about lowering our suspension rate. And that has several strategies in there for when you lower your suspension rate, obviously you're lowering your disruptions, you're lowering your overall chaos in school, and that will have a bearing on how students feel about about feeling safe at school or not.
Maria, how much do you feel that this is maybe a spillover into school from internet use and from social media and that kind of thing of not feeling safe? Because I know that there's a lot of bullying on social media and that kind of thing that maybe spills over into kids not feeling safe at school because they see this bullying going on the internet and that kind of thing. So,
well, the percentage, I would say that of that kind of bullying that spills over to school is 100%. All of it affects
right.
what goes on at school, because
Right.
it's, we're not that big of a community. It's probably between people who go to the same school. But how much of not feeling safe? I mean, I think we have to own that too, in terms of there's got to be something that we can do to alleviate that. And we have, peer, peer helpers that do conflict management and things like that. Those types of interventions that need to increase so that we're sure that even if they have this type of thing going on outside, that it's taken care of at school.
And Maria, one more thing in regards to the suspensions. I know there's a big push from the state to minimize suspensions. Fortunately now, because I sub for principals in 3 different districts, actually 4 different districts, and get to see a lot of different schools. And so I get to see the difference between schools. And there may be one school that has a very low suspension rate, but that's because they're not suspending children that actually, in my opinion, should be suspension. And what it's doing, it's driving up the unsafe numbers of kids who feel unsafe because they're keeping these kids in that are throwing chairs and trying to hurt other kids. I mean, you really have to do something drastic to get suspended there. Whereas you go to other schools and they have a higher suspension rate, but it is much more, the kids feel safe, the parents feel safe about the kids going there. Now, I'm not saying suspension is good. That's not my point. My point is you do want to have as many interventions in place to help children so they don't get to the suspension rate. But I know there are administrators out there who would like to suspend a child, and they believe that child should be suspended. However, they are not doing it because they want it. They're playing the numbers game. They don't want that suspension on their school report card, so to speak. So anyways, and I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying be aware of that.
Yeah, I'm fully aware that there's different ways to report. But I think that in that year in particular, when we have, which is not last year, but the year before, when we had that higher suspension rate, if you look at our demographics inside of that suspension rate, our students with special education services are at a much higher rate than our general education students. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that we did not have a TSP program, a therapeutic support program for our students with emotional disturbance. So, I mean, because our numbers are so small, our school is so small, 5 to 10 kids makes a huge difference in your data. And so that is, so that's why, we have to disaggregate and look and see where those things are. But part of that was due to not having a TSP program. And we do have one now.
Thank you.
And Robert, you're right. Discipline and environment are not necessarily the same thing. Suspensions should happen based on a behavior, not how we want our pie chart to look at the end of the year. And the other issue with that is the state's really caught up in this suspension's an awful thing, but it's a never-ending cycle. Because if you're 5% one year, well, you got to be 4% the next year. Yeah. And so it's it doesn't really make sense. I think suspensions happen when behavior is warranted, not pie charts and all that stuff.
Okay. So Maria, this is, if you recall, I was trying to be a fly on the wall in your site council meetings last year, and unfortunately COVID came along and put a pretty much big grinding halt to that. So this is actually the culmination of all those discussions that you guys were having during those site council meetings.
Yes, that's correct.
And you do have a site council parent on, right, Angela?
Yes. Angela?
Hello. Yes, I'm actually the vice chairman as well for the Bechtel Grove Middle School Student Site Council.
So the one thing I was really hoping to see out of all this data was the new data from standardized testing that would have hopefully given us a different perspective on a lot of the data that you've got here, because unfortunately this is all dated.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. We have
Angela?
one new data. But so part of what's in my SPSA is the use of local assessments, because we don't know, or we know that we won't have standardized testing this year. Again, and we can't really just base our decisions on data that's 3 or 4 years old.
Right. Well, I wanted to recognize Angela because we appreciate when parents help and participate on these kind of things. They tend to not be the most exciting things in the world, but it's critical that we get some input from parents who know firsthand from their kids information that we sometimes don't know. And I appreciate you being on it.
Well, Mark,
Yeah,
I really appreciate that. And I have 2 children that are in different grades, and seeing how everything's been adjusting and how everything is been changed, but also too, I have a lot of family friends who reach out to me because I am more technologically savvy than them. So having that other perspective of other families, I've been able to kind of help with that input of other students about what their struggles are, what their kind of good parts about this distant learning has been.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what I wanted to say is not only was she able to give input, never having been on a site council, her input was amazing. Thank you.
And Maria, I apologize. I forgot to give you your cherry. I have spoken to several students who attend your school or have attended your school, and I asked about the school, how they like the school. They love the school, they love their teachers, and they feel completely safe. To the several I've spoke to in person. That's why when I saw that data, it really kind of hit me sideways. But anyways, I just want to say, the students I've talked to, they said they love your school and feel perfectly safe.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. You also know that this survey is only 7th grade. It's not 6th and it's not 8th.
Got it. Okay. We have a motion to approve item P, the SPSA
I'll
from.
vote to approve item P.
And we have a second.
I'll second.
A second from Jeannie. Great. And any further discussion? Thank you for the presentation, Maria. That was very, very nice. We'll spend some more time in that document, that's for sure. Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. We are at items for the next board meeting or the adjournment. Do we have any comments on either of those items?
You're begging for an adjournment, aren't you, Alex? I can tell.
Would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll move that we adjourn.
From Paula. And do we have a second?
I second it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your input tonight. Good discussions. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Okay.
Have a good night, folks.
Everybody.